diaper drive because there's a lot of government assistance that refugees can get. There's a lot of organizations that help with transportation, but something that just seems to get left out is baby supplies. You know, you can get formula, you can get food, but like supplies for babies seems to be like a gap. So they wanted to do a diaper drive, and this was a nationwide thing. Love Without Borders just called out to their local volunteers and said, hey, host one in your town. So Bailey's friend is the local representative for Love Without Borders. Her name's Robin. And so she wanted to hold this drive, and she needed a place to have it. They couldn't find a venue. So, of course, when we heard about it, we're like, yes, have it here. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want to be about. So she came, set up. They had some light snacks, some just, you know, really cool stuff. Like she had these tables set up with things you could do, like activities for kids. This was, you could make bracelets, and all the different colors represent different things: love, hope, peace, growth. And the idea was you make it, and you can look at it, you know, wear your bracelet throughout the week, and think about the refugees, pray for the refugees, remind yourself to keep them in your heart. There was a table you could write a note, and they would deliver it to local refugee families. Just people said things like, hey, we're glad you're here, we're glad to be your neighbor, we love you, things like that. There was this little art project where you could make a little earth with markers and just, you know, stuff to remind you that the world is bigger than just our little corner of it. And they had a table set up with donations so people could make donations to Coptic Orthodox charities and help them run smoothly. So it was really cool. I don't want you to see that picture yet. So, as many of you know, we announced it, right? And you brought diapers. And this was pretty much, this table, what it looks like right here, was the amount of diapers that our church contributed. Well, throughout the day yesterday, people came and went, and there were about 15, 20 people that stayed and kind of took part in the activities. But then there were like 6 or 7 other people that just came just to drop off diapers. So it was really encouraging to see community activity there. And at the end, that's what it looked like. There was a pretty significant amount of diapers. We had to build that wall with the box diapers so that the packaged diapers wouldn't just spread out. So they were, Nora from Coptic Orthodox Charities was really encouraged, really thankful for the work that we help them do. And it's really cool that now local families are going to have diapers. She said that they're getting 3 families this month that have diaper-aged children. 2 from Afghanistan, and I forget the other one, but it's just a really cool thing that they're doing. And it's great that we can be neighborly and really demonstrate what we talked about last week, living outward and being a blessing to the nations, to all the nations, especially when they get to come into our own backyard. So that was really hopeful, that was really encouraging, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. And next time, you know, we have something like this, we can all be even more of a part of it and just enjoy our time together and celebrate the work we do for those around us. Let's sing our final song. We're going to sing one more song, Vapor, and then we're going to sing another song at the end after our sermon.
It's a chasing of the wind, the substance of the form, so pale and thin. Let the veil of earth be stretched again. Holy, oh, behold the trees clap their hands for you, oceans they dance for you. clap their hands for you. Oceans, they dance for you. You are holy, infinite and holy. A billion suns rise for you. Clouds paint the skies for you. Mountains stand tall for you. Valleys bow down to you. Everything rising to sing all of their songs to you. The impossible and holy. King become fools for you. Kingdoms to rules for you. Favor finds ground for you. Music finds sound in you. Everything rising. Everything rising. Everything rising. Everything
Good morning. This is our final series, our final sermon in our series called Directions. Do you remember directions? The circles, backward, forward, inward, outward, and upward. And these are the ways that we position ourselves as a community, the ways we posture ourselves in our world. In the first week, we talked about backward, looking back to our roots, to the biblical tradition, to these ancient texts that inform us of our story and how we got to where we are today. And of course, we barely scratched the surface of that story, but we saw that there's a trajectory, there's a movement in the story. And we saw that in the story, God appears to people as a call to Moses, a call in the burning bush, to Abraham, a call to go form a new people. And we saw that that call looks different in different times, in different places, but it's always a call to justice, it's always a call to work on behalf of the oppressed. who work to be a blessing to other people. And we trace that call all the way to Jesus, who we see the call most clearly manifested. He stood in the synagogue and said, "The Lord has sent me to proclaim good news to the poor, proclaim freedom for the prisoned, recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And we saw that that movement is really our story. It's the story we find ourselves in. For those of us who are Christian, we look to Jesus to hear that call, to see the divine call on our lives. And we saw from the life of the Apostle Paul that he had the same call through Jesus. But he was able to take that message of hope and bring it into new contexts and to make it available for more people than had ever thought imagined. He was a Jewish rabbi, a Jewish of the Jewish, right? Like, he had it all together. Very proud of that heritage. And he knew it backwards and forwards, inward and out. And yet he was able to take that tradition, the same roots that we talked about, the same roots of the prophets and Moses, and these stories of God's divine call on people's lives. He was able to take that, his tradition, and bring it to Romans, to Greeks, people who had no concept of the God he had experienced. And we talked about moving forward. That's what we called forward, taking our message, taking our roots, and being able to contextualize them, talk intelligently about them in all kinds of different contexts. I have a really great example of how this can play out in like our normal day-to-day. Keith and I, the last couple months, have gone to this event at Southern Brewing. It's called Hops and Humanities. And what they do is they have the University of South Florida professors from the Humanities Department come and they share little presentations on their area of research. It's pretty cool. Like 2 months ago was religious studies. Religion professors came and talked. Last month, which was like last week, the one for February, it was the gender studies department. And they just share like 10 to 15 minute presentations about what they've studied, what their research, their area of expertise. But what ends up happening is really cool, because what ends up happening is you're sitting around listening, and when it's done, now you're with people that you haven't met before, more than likely, and you're talking about ideas. You're exchanging ideas. And you're learning from each other, and you're listening to each other. And something I realized after I went to the last one was that most people want the same thing. Like, most people want society to run smoothly. They don't want people to kill each other. They don't want people to hurt each other. They don't want people to destroy each other. Like, everyone desires this. And there's all kinds of different ways that people think they can make that work. But it's all there. People want that. Those are the kinds of places we need to be around. Places where there's ideas being exchanged. Because we feel like we have a really good system for making the world work right, don't we? The ethic of Jesus, when applied to society, is life-giving, life-changing. So we have to be able to talk about it with people who have different ideas, different opinions, to work through those ideas with people, and to be able to give our message of hope in all kinds of different contexts. And then we talked about inward, the idea that as a community we face ourselves inside. We look at the parts of ourselves that are broken and we bring them out so that they can experience healing. We talked about the fact that the Apostle Paul said a new creation has arrived. This new creation is a new way of existing. In another place he called it a new humanity. It's a humanity characterized not by violence and oppression and greed and destruction, but by reconciliation and love. And we found that we have been given that ministry of reconciliation. We reconcile the broken parts of ourselves so that we can then create a space where others can be reconciled to each other and can find the healing and growth they need. And we do that by providing a safe place. Because nobody wants to open up to somebody if they feel like they're just going to be shut down because of it, or judged, or expelled from the group. And then last week we talked about outward, how we posture ourselves to the broader world around us. And we talked about the fact that Abraham, the first one in the story to really hear the divine call, had one reason for existing, that his people would become a blessing to the other nations. That the nation that would come from him would not just seek its own good, its own power, its own self-existence, but that it would exist so that all the world would be blessed. And we traced that project all the way, again, through Jesus and into Paul, who said, look, you now, children of Abraham spiritually, you are to be a blessing to all the nations. And we saw that Paul said, you have been given this new creation, you are a new creature, so that you can do good works, which God has prepared in advance for you to do. So we looked at what those works were. We looked back at the prophets who taught us that you have to embrace the stranger among you, that you have to embrace the immigrant and the refugee, that hospitality is what characterizes the people of God. We saw that those who have no family structures, widows, orphans, are to be taken care of. That people who are poor are not to be living in abject poverty, but are to be provided for. So now that brings us to upward. The last week, how we posture ourselves towards God. Before we get into that, though, I want to make a point. The whole point of this series, the whole idea, is that we as a community face all these directions. These are all ways we posture ourselves in the world. We face every single one of these directions. That's what makes a church a church. If all we did was face backward and look at our roots, right, and study the Bible and learn ancient languages and write papers on it and debate meanings of words, then we would be academics. You know, that's what the religion department at South Florida does. And as important as that is, and they, I dare say, do it better than any of us in this room, we don't call that a church. And if all we did was look forward and just try to contextualize our message, be really good at taking words and ideas and twisting them to fit other words and ideas, we would be philosophers or motivational speakers. And as important as those things are, we typically don't call that church. And if all we ever did was look inward and sought personal growth and healing, we'd be therapists or support group. And as important as those things are, we don't typically call them church. And if all we ever did was look outside of ourselves and try to help the hurting and heal the broken around us and provide for those who need to be provided for, we would be a charity or a nonprofit. And as awesome as those things are, we don't typically call them church. And if all we ever did was sing songs of praise and celebration and try to foster emotional experiences to something bigger than ourselves, then we'd be, I don't know what the word for that is, because unfortunately that's what most people think a church is. But the point is that all of these things together are what make a church. A church is a unique institution in that it focuses on every one of these directions. So with that in mind, let's move in to our final direction, upward. Genesis chapter 1. We talked a lot about Genesis chapter 3 during the inward week. And we mentioned that Genesis 1 and 2, we talked about them briefly, that they were creation accounts. Today we're going to look a little bit closer at Genesis 1, not super close, but we're just going to talk about it a little bit more closely. This passage, Genesis 1, it's a creation account. I'm sure most of you know that. It recounts how the world was created. And it's poetic. It's an amazing poem. It's beautiful. I love poetry. I try to write it myself. But I got to tell you, I don't think anything I've ever written or ever will write, or anything I do at all in my life for that matter, will last for 3,000 plus years. I just don't think it's going to be the case. right? Why? What's the difference between something that I may write in Genesis 1? Genesis 1 is good. That's the difference, right? So you've got really, really well done writing here. Parallelisms, two sets of 3 days apiece, and different things are created, and they mirror each other. And at the end of every day, there's a refrain that comes back again and again. What is it? It was good. It was good. God saw that it was good. In verse 4, God saw the light was good. Verse 12, the earth brought forth vegetation, and God saw that it was good. Verse 18, God saw that the sun and the moon and the stars were good. And on. Good, goodness fills the creation. Of course, we know what happens in Genesis chapter 3. We try our best to undo the goodness. But we also learn that no matter what we do, right, no matter what humanity does to try to tear this thing apart, the goodness can't be defeated. So Genesis 1, it is good. But the poem ends with a final section, a seventh day. It's not parallel, doesn't fit in with the two sets of three. Nothing is created, and the refrain, it is good, does not appear. On this day, we see that God rests from the work of creation. The text says that God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, or made it special, gave it a special purpose, a sacred purpose. And because of the way the poem moves, our attention is drawn to that seventh day. Right? You have this in music, where you have a musical phrase that's different, maybe the use of dissonance, maybe it's just an all-new phrase, a new phrase altogether. Your ear hears it, you draw attention to it, and composers will use that to try to tell the story through music. That's what's going on here. Why is this day different? You could argue that really this whole creation account is to get us to the seventh day, is to show us the importance of this seventh day. So what's so important about this rest day? Why does it matter? Why is it so important that we have to have a whole creation account to get us to this day? Leviticus chapter 23. This text is part of the law code given to Israel. And this specific area of the law lays out all the feasts, the festivals that they're to have throughout the year. Laws about feasts. Isn't that pretty cool? I mean, there's no law in the books in America that I'm aware of that you are required to party. Maybe there should be. I think at the end, you'll agree there should be, right? Partying is important. Feasting is important. Festivals are important. So important, in fact, that it's commanded by God in his law to his people. And we see this speak to the people of Israel and say to them, these are the appointed festivals of the Lord that you shall proclaim as sacred gatherings, my appointed festivals. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of complete rest, a sacred gathering. You shall do no work. It is a Sabbath to the Lord throughout your settlement. The first festival occurs every week. Every single week, there's a day built in to celebrate the gifts of food, of family, of rest. The text goes on to lay out several more. The Feast of Booths, the Feast of the First Fruits, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of the Day of Atonement, and they're all the same. You shall do no work. That's a lot of time off from work. Like, God is killing productivity in Israel here. He must not care about industry whatsoever. Think about this. If there's 6 festivals, that's like one every other month. And these don't think Thanksgiving when you hear feast. Don't think like a day of eating. And then, if you're lucky, you get Friday off too. But you might have to go back to work. That's not what's going on here. These are like full festivals. People will travel to be with family. There are special songs and chants and calls that the people would sing as they went to either Jerusalem or leaving Jerusalem to go be with their families. These are like big periods of celebration. Think Christmas, not Thanksgiving. Christmas 6 times a year. I know some of you might be thinking, like, no way could I do that. Christmas is too stressful. One Christmas a year is all I need. I don't need the burden, the stress, the guilt, the emotional drama of 6 Christmases. And that's the point. That's the point. The year is built around festivals and feasting and celebration. Think about it. Our Jewish friends today still structure their whole year around these festivals. So what's this all about? Why celebrate? Why festivals? Why feasting? In another law book, Deuteronomy, we see these words. Nope. Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances that the Lord your God charged me to teach to you, to observe in the land you are about to cross into, so that you and your children and your children's children may fear the Lord your God all the days of your life, keep his decrees and commands that I am commanding you, so that you may enjoy long life. Why the commands? Specifically, why the commands to feast and to not work? Do not let work consume, so that you may enjoy long life. That's something hard to argue with, right? Like, who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want to live, and who doesn't want to enjoy that life? When I hear those words, I can't help but think of the words of Jesus. I came to bring life and to give it abundantly. Why celebrate? Why feast? Why fast from work? Because that's the only way to enjoy life fully. God's not saying, I want you to scrape by. I want you to just survive. Hold on until you finally die. No. Life is rewarding, is fulfilling. Life is a gift. So we celebrate, and we praise, and we sing. We have holy festivals, right? Maybe that's like what Sunday should feel like a little more. A time of celebration, a sacred space of celebration where the community gathers together to give thanks for the great gifts we've been given. We see another time that the Apostle Paul says, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through songs and hymns and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. So now we have this other aspect to our celebration, to our singing, gratitude, a deep sense of thankfulness. It's a theme that comes up over and over again. Give thanks always, Paul says somewhere else. Thanks be to God for his unspeakable gift. Over and over we see the idea of being thankful, having gratitude towards God, and acting it out in song, in dance, in feast, in festival. Now, we don't always feel this, do we? We're going to be real here because what else? Like, oh, let's go celebrate God and like let's leave. And none of you are going to necessarily feel that. We don't always see the cause of celebration. We don't really view life as a gift. We don't structure our year around celebrating because our year, maybe year after year, isn't what we want it to be. I have conversations with people all the time. I'm talking like 3 conversations a week, every week. Had one this morning with somebody. The idea, I don't really think that God cares about me. Or, another aspect of this is, I don't even think there's a God. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. And if you ask that person, like, where's that coming from? Well, my life's not where I want it to be right now. And I pray, and I pray, and I pray that God would change my life. And nothing ever happens, everything stays the same, and it goes on the way it was before. I usually tell those people, yeah, I hear you, man. Maybe you've had an experience in your life where you desired something so strongly, but it was out of your control. And the only option you thought you had was to just pour yourself out in prayer. You begged God for something, and it never happened. You hoped, you believed, you longed, you prayed, and nothing changed. Maybe when I use words like celebrating, gratitude, maybe when I say things like, we thank God for God's gifts, you cringe. You feel uncomfortable, you squirm in your seat. Maybe you can't believe in God anymore. Maybe you believe in God, but you don't believe that God is good. This sermon is called Upward. Why upward? Is God up in the air? No. It's a metaphor that's old. It's stuck with us. There's biblical language about it, that God sits high on a hill, or he's above in the highest level of the heavens. But there's other language in the Bible too. We talked about this during our roots. Like when the Apostle Paul says that we move and live within God, or that we find our very being from within God. So just as there are different ways to describe God, there are different ways we experience God. I think celebration and gratitude are key, and I want to get back there, and I think we can get there together. But first, I want to talk about some of the other responses. Maybe you feel like Jacob at the river, and a man comes and just starts beating you up. And you're just beating him up back, throwing punches, grappling him, fighting, struggling. Come to find out, that was God. Maybe your relationship with God feels like a struggle and a fight and a wrestle, like Jacob. Maybe you don't see life as a gift. Maybe when I talk about life being a gift, you don't view it that way. Maybe you sing not songs of gratitude in your heart, but maybe you sing songs that sound more like Ecclesiastes. Life is smoke, life is smoke. A wisp of wind that passes by. You work and work, and then you die. Right? Maybe that's your heart song. Maybe you're like Job, and you've been through real pain, and real loss, and real suffering. And when you look for an answer, and you call out to God, it's nothing that you thought it would be. Or maybe you're like Jesus, and in the greatest moment of your deepest struggle, you look around and realize you've been forsaken. These are all valid responses. The depth of human pain, the depth of human struggle is nothing that falls outside of God. If that's how you feel, if that's your experience of God, then it is what it is. There's nothing wrong with you. That's just how it goes. Which is why we have story after story, and the very one we worship felt forsaken by God. But the second thing I want to say is that maybe, perhaps, when you feel that way, you're looking for God in the wrong places. There's a beautiful story about the prophet Elijah that goes like this. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore through the mountains and shattered the rocks. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. You might think God is found in something big and flashy, like an earthquake or an answered prayer or a miracle or an intervention or an audible voice or a religious experience, but you might be looking in the wrong place. You might need to look at something more quiet, something more mundane, something more everyday. James says that every generous act of giving, every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. Every generous act of giving. Has anyone ever been generous towards you? Have you ever experienced somebody sacrifice for you out of their love for you? Find God in that gift. According to James, that is a divine gift. Have you ever stood on a mountainside overlooking a valley with trees and clouds and sky surrounding you, and you've been overcome by the beauty? Something larger than you is pulling you out of yourself. Find God in that gift. Have you watched a child be born and take its first breath? Find God in that gift. Do you breathe in and out, over and over, countless times a day, each breath giving you a greater opportunity to enjoy your life? Find God in that gift. And of course, look towards a young first century Jewish man who didn't have a lot going on from normal standards, wasn't really cool or popular, didn't have a fancy job, wasn't a political ruler, but who showed us that there's more to life than seeking wealth or fame, who showed us that there's more to life than dominating and being violent to others, who showed us that true love means laying down our lives for our friends. Find God in his gift. We can rest in those gifts. We can find joy and have feasts around those gifts. You may not feel that God is with you. You may have long since lost a personal connection, but you can find God in his gifts of life and love and beauty. And when we do that, we will enjoy our lives. We're going to sing another song now, For the Beauty of the Earth. It's an older hymn that is one of my favorite songs because it kind of sums up what we are talking about. It talks about the response to seeing the beauty of nature. It talks about the response to seeing the beauty of the human love that we have, sister, brother, child. And it says, "These are our hymns of praise to thee." That is what it looks like to face upward. To realize that everything good in our lives is a gift, and we can have gratitude and celebration for them. Let's pray. God, we are thankful for the gifts around us. Thankful for the example of the prophets, of the early fathers, and of Jesus. Thankful for his life, what he showed us through his teaching, what he demonstrated in his death. And we're thankful for our breath, our food, our homes, our friends, our families, all the good gifts that proceed from you. Help us to see you in those and not to get caught up in the flashy, over-the-top, dramatic demonstrations of what we think might be going on in you.
Go in peace.